welcome back. Today we're going to talk about math. I realize it's not everybody's favorite subject, but we do use it a lot in knitting when we're adjusting patterns that we're working from to make them bigger, smaller, change the fit a little bit to our own preferences, and when we're designing our own patterns. So what I'm going to talk about is an algebraic formula that helps you figure out decreases and increases. And what we've done in our class is, first of all, drawn out our schematic. And I've done that here with a very basic schematic. There's no sleeves here. This is just the body. And I've put in my measurements, both in circumference and half, front or back. So the hip here is at 44 inches, and then that is the circumference. So I have this little circular arrow to designate that's the circumference, and 22 inches across for just the front. So when you're doing your calculations, you can think in terms of working in the circumference or working flat for just the front or the back. Even if you're working circularly, you can do all your calculations for half the garment, knowing that you will repeat your instructions for the back or for the front, depending on which side you start out in the circle on. So I'm just going to, having said that, I'm just going to describe this process for working half of the garment. In this case, it will be the front, because I'm going to talk about the neck shaping up here in a minute. So I've got 22 inches across at the low hip, and you want, when you have your schematic, you'll draw out all of your horizontal measurements and all of your vertical measurements. So you're going to want to keep track of or write all of those in. And you're going to have to make sure that you have done a gauge swatch, or you know your gauge. In my case, for this example, my gauge is going to be 5 stitches to the inch and 6.65 rows to the inch. Now you'll notice this is not a whole number. In knitting, we don't knit fractions of a stitch. We only work with whole numbers. But for our calculations, we're going to go ahead and incorporate the fractions. And then at the very end, we're going to round up to the nearest whole number. So you'll see what I mean as I work through this example. So going back here to my diagram, so I've got 22 inches across the low hip. I've got 16 inches across at the bottom of the waist. I usually like to knit an inch or an inch and a half, even without any shaping, after I've achieved the number that I want at the low waist, and then I'll start increasing to go to the underarm. So I'll knit even, and then I'll go from 16 inches up to 19 inches, and then at the underarm I will I'm still at 19 inches, but I will have bound off some stitches there, which will take and decrease some, which will take me to the measurement at the cross back. So this number I know, this number I'll figure out, but this number I already know, the cross back measurement. And then some of these other numbers here I am going to figure out as I do my math. So I'm also going to take into consideration the vertical measurement. So I've got 3 inches for a hem here with no shaping, and then I've got from the 3-inch point here to the bottom of the waist, I've got 10 inches, and then 1 inch even here, and then 9.5 inches from the top of the waist to the underarm, and then from the underarm to the shoulder I've got 9 inches. Now I've got other measurements filled in here because I've done some decreasing. So for example, here I've got 8 inches from the top of this decrease section to the shoulder, and I've got Actually, there's the 8 inches, yeah, it's this section right here. And then I've got 1 inch approximately from this bound off section. I'm going to decrease this over 1 inch according to my drawing. So at this point I haven't done any calculations yet. I'm just in my mind thinking about the measurements that I took on my body and just filled in my diagram with those measurements. These are going to change as I do my calculations because the math might tell me that I need more space to cram in the number of decreases that I'll need to get from this dimension, this 19 stitches to, or 19 inches rather, to 14 inches. So we're going to figure that out as we go. So once you've filled in all of your numbers, you're going to end up with a few that you don't know. For example, here at the neck, we won't know what this distance is exactly. We're going to fix that as we go. So I've got, after I filled in all the numbers that I do know, then I'm going to go back and calculate those from inches into stitches. So I'm going to take 22 here times my gauge for stitches. So 22 times 5 is going to give me 110 stitches at this point. And then 16 times 5 is going to give me 80 stitches. And 19 times 5 is going to give me 95. This number I don't know just yet. 14 times 5 is going to give me 70. Okay, and here I have my shoulders 4 inches. That number I did know, so that's going to be 20 stitches. 20 times 5, 20 stitches. For the neck here, now if I have 70 stitches here, and 20 stitches here, and 20 stitches here, then that is going to be 20 stitches here. Now, from at this point at the bottom of the decreasing, I'm not going to have 20 stitches and 20 stitches here. I'm going to have more. So what I'm going to do is for my 70 stitches here, I'm going to take my 20 stitches that I'm going to bind off for the center, and then take the remaining, which is 50, and divide it by 2. So that's where I'm going to get 25 stitches for this section and 25 stitches for this section. So then now I know I need to decrease 5 stitches here over these rows here to get to 20 stitches up here. And I'll do the same for here. I'll start out with 25 and then decrease to get to 20 up at the shoulder here. And I will have approximately 1 inch in order to do that decreasing. And we'll go through the math to figure out the rate of decreases, how many decreases to do over however many rows. Okay, so now that I've got all my numbers filled in, I'm going to write those off to the side here. So I've got the hip is going to be 110 stitches, my waist is 80 stitches, bust 95 stitches. At the underarm here, this is this section, I'm going to bind off 5 stitches because I've got 1 inch there, 5 stitches. The high bust, that is, so here's the bust right here at 95 stitches. So the high bust is where the underarm actually is. So that is 14 inches actually where this decreasing has happened. Here's the high bust here. So that's for 70 stitches. The center neck, 20 stitches, which equals 4 inches. The right and left front are going to be 25 stitches each, which are going to be 5 inches. So that'll equal my 14 inches across. So 5 inches there, 5 inches there, 4 inches there. And back center neck is 6 inches here, so that's 30 stitches. The cross back, which is this entire section here, is 14 inches, which is 70 stitches. And I've got my high bust, I have it 1785 stitches. Oh, this number here, so what I did, that's this. So I didn't know the dimension. What I needed to do was take 19 and minus the 2 inches that I'm going to bind off, and that'll give me the distance from here to here in inches, which turns out to be 17, and it's 85 stitches. So I've got all my numbers filled in here, and now what I'm going to do is several worksheets. The worksheets, I'm going to do a hip to waist decrease worksheet, a waist to full bust increase worksheet, a high bust to cross back decrease worksheet, and a neck shaping worksheet. So one worksheet for this shaping, one worksheet for that shaping, one worksheet for that shaping, and another one for the neck here. So let's get started, and we'll start with the hip to waist. Now we had in my class, I had given out algebra formula that we use, and before I write down the formula, what I'm going to do is talk about known things and unknown things. So this is going to be my hip to waist. Shaping. Okay, so I'm going to identify some things. First of all, I need to know how many total rows I have available to do my shaping. Let's take a peek at our schematic. I need to know a total number of rows I have available here to do my shaping. So multiplying this 10 inches times my row gauge here, I know that I have 66.5 rows to get rid of X number of stitches. So total number of rows, we're going to call that T. This is total number of rows available for shaping. So we know that is, from our schematic that we drew, here, 66.5. So we're going to write that up here, 66.5. Then we're getting rid of some stitches, S. Okay. Now S is going to be the total number of stitches that we need to decrease in order to get from our wider or bigger number to our smaller number up here. I got to mention before I go on that these are actual body measurements. I haven't added ease. When you do this for yourself, make sure you add ease. So I'm going to make a note for myself here for the future. Measurements do not include ease. So this would be for body hugging, something that is going to be like a camisole, a cami, or something that you're going to wear next to the skin that you want it to be pretty much the same size as your body. My little design here. Okay, so back to stitches. Total stitches to decrease. So I have here 110 stitches, and here I have 80 stitches. So I need to go from 110 to 80, and that is going to be 30. So I'm going to write that down. Total stitches, number of stitches to decrease equals 30. Okay, then we have U. U is decrease units. So when you decrease or increase, you may be doing it in, you might be adding a single unit, or you might be working in multiples. For example, back to my diagram here, when I do my decreasing for this, I'm going to be decreasing here and here so that I get my angle. This is working flat. If I was working in the round, I would be doing here, and then again repeating for the back, here and here. So working in the round, it would be 4. For the ease of calculating, I found that it's best, even if I'm working in the round, it's best to do my calculations assuming that I'm working flat, and then just repeat my instructions for myself for the backside when I get to it. That way I don't have to try and work out the calculations all at once. And I like twos. Twos are easy to work with. That's my biggest reasoning for that. So because I'm going to be doing decreasing twice, each time I decrease, my U here, total number of units, or I would say total stitches decreased per row, per row. So in this case, it's going to be 2. Okay, L. Now, whenever you want to decrease or increase or stick stuff into any linear distance in knitting, you always want to do it evenly. You don't want to stack your stuff up so that it, you have the bulk of it in one section or whatnot. You want as even a distribution as possible. So in order to achieve that, you end up alternating your decreases or increases, and to do that you end up working at 2 different rates. You almost always end up working at 2 different rates. So we're going to have a lower rate, which I'm just going to write that down. Lower rate to decrease. I don't know that number yet. And then I'm going to have an H, which is the higher rate, to decrease. And I don't know that number yet either. So I'm going to figure that out with the formula that we're going to discuss in a second. Then we have 2 more unknowns. This equals the number of times to decrease at the lower rate. And Y equals the number of times at the higher rate. Okay, so now that I've identified what I know and what I don't know, so I know these things up here. I know how many rows I have. I know how many rows I want to, how many total stitches I want to get rid of, and I know how many stitches per row that I'm going to get rid of. I need to figure out my rate, and I need to figure out the times I'm going to be doing those things at these rates. So the first step, just going to take it step by step. So step 1, let's move our chart over. Step number 1 is to find our lower and higher rate. Okay, so there's a formula for this. The formula is T divided by S divided by U. That's going to equal our base rate. Okay, we know T is 65.5 or 66.5 divided by, so right now I'm just filling in my numbers that I know. So S, that's 30, divided by U, that's 2, equals the base rate. 66.5 divided by 15, because I'm just going to fill in my, I'm just going to do all the math that's in the parentheses gets done first. So 30 divided by 2 is 15. So now 66.5 divided by 15 equals 4.43. So our rate is going to be the next, our two rates are going to be the next. I like to work with even numbers. You could do odd numbers, but even numbers are what you need in order to ensure that your shaping is going to happen on right side rows, not wrong side rows. So we're going to choose even numbers. There will be some instances where that might not happen because your rate might be, your base rate might be pretty low. Let's say it's a 2 or a 1 or something like that, and your next even number is going to be a negative number, so, or a 0 or something. So we'll I actually have a couple of examples where we'll talk about that. But generally, you're going to want to pick the next higher even number and the next we're rounding to next closest lower even number. So in this case, my lower even number is going to be 2, and my higher even number is going to be 6. So L is going to be 2, and H is going to be 6. All right, so now I know more than I did before. I have two numbers filled in here. I have to now calculate to figure out what X and Y are going to be. So that's step 2. Step number 2. And I have 2 more formulas for this. They're easy. You'll see in just a second. And all I'm going to do is plug my numbers in to my formulas. Now, we're going to always use the same formula. It doesn't change no matter what type of shaping you're doing. So the formula is this: y equals t minus L times S divided by U. Over, or this is going to be a division, it'll turn into a division problem earlier, H minus L. Okay, and then my other formula is going to be X equals S divided by U minus Y. Okay, so first we'll figure out this one. Now we are solving for Y, which is the number of times to do our shaping at our higher rate, which we've already figured out. So we're just going to fill in our numbers. Y equals T T 66.5 minus L, from our number L is 2, times S divided by U. So S is 30 divided by 2. H is 6 minus L, which is 2. And then now we're just going to work through the very simple math. Y equals 66.5 minus, first we're going to do our, or whatever's in the parentheses. So it's going to be 2 times 30 divided by 2 is 15. 6 minus 2. $66.5 minus, okay, 2 times 15 is 30, and 6 minus 2 is 4. Y equals 66.5 minus 30 is 36.5 divided by 4. So y equals 9.125. So all I did was I just plugged in my numbers, and then I just started doing each little bit step by step and until I got down to my final number. So now we're going to do the same thing over here. We're just going to fill in our numbers. We don't know what x is. So x equals S30 divided by U2 minus y. We just figured out what y is. Y is 91.25. 9.125. Now I haven't filled them up here yet, because when I'm all done with my calculating, I'm going to round those numbers. So because remember, we don't work with fractions. We can only work with whole numbers. So x equals, so 30 divided by 2 is 15 minus 9.125. X equals 5.875. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and round my numbers. So this one's going to go to the next closest number, x equals 6. And this one's going to go to the next closest number, y equals 9. So now I'll fill them in up here. X is 6 and y is 9. Okay, so this is all good, right? But we need to turn it into something that we can understand for knitting. So how do we translate this into knitting? I'm going to translate it for you just now. What we're trying to achieve here is we're going to decrease U stitches every L rows X times. Then we'll decrease U stitches every H rows Y times. So let's turn that, let's just plug our numbers in. We're going to decrease U is 2 stitches every L. Our lower rate is 2. X is 6. 6 times. Then we're going to decrease 2 stitches every H is 6. 6 rows. Y times. Y is 9. 9 times. So our knitting directions will be decrease 2 stitches every 2 rows 6 times, then decrease 2 stitches every 6 rows 9 times. We have to check our math to make sure that we're on the right track here. So let's do that. Okay. And this is where you're going to find out if you're going to be right on with your measurements. Now remember, we said 66.5 rows. Well, we don't knit half rows. We only knit whole rows. Just like we don't knit half stitches, we only work whole stitches. So let's see what happens. We've got our rows. So we've got 2 rows 6 times. That's 12. 12 rows. And 6 rows 9 times. That's 54 rows. 12 plus 54 is 66 rows. So we are actually going to work a total of 66 rows for our shaping, not 66 and a half. Now let's check our stitches. We've got 2 stitches that we were decreasing 6 times. So again, 2 times 6 is 12. And then here, the second set of directions, we're getting rid of 2 stitches 9 times. So that's 18. And this is where it's important. This one's got to match what our initial motivation was. Sometimes there'll be instances where you might have to fudge things for 1 stitch. And I have an example for that, but you'll see what I mean when we get to it. So 12 plus 18 is indeed 30 stitches, and 30 stitches is what S, the total number of stitches we need to get rid of to get from 110 to 80. Okay, so I know that's a lot. Let's go over the next example. The next example is we've done our decreases. We've gotten from 110 stitches out to 80. We'll knit, forge ahead for 6.65 rows. In reality, we're not going to knit 6.65 rows. What are we going to do? We're going to knit 7 rows. Because why? We're going to round to the next nearest whole number. This case would be 7. So we'll knit our 7 rows, and then now we need to get from our 80 stitches, and we've got to increase so that we get to 95 stitches. We need the full bust circumference here. So let's figure that out. Get a new sheet of paper. Okay, so this is going to be my waist to bust increases this time. Okay, and I'm going to write down the same information that I did for my last example. So T equals total number of rows available for shaping. And we know this number from our measurement. Okay, so we're going from here to here, and that is 8.5 inches, which was 56.5 rows. So this is going to be 56.5. S, okay, equals, that's the total stitches that we need to increase. All right, so what are we doing from our schematic again? We are going from 80 stitches here, and for 19 inches, which was here, we needed 95 stitches, so we're going from 80 to 95, and that's a total of 15. So we are going to increase 15 stitches. That's our goal. Okay, U, same as before, units. How many units of stitches are we dealing with each row? Again, we're going to be increasing here and here. We've got 2 sides. So U, our units, are going to be 2 stitches per row. So total number of stitches to increase per row can equals 2. L is going to be our lower rate. To do shaping, and we don't know that yet. H is going to be our higher rate. And we also don't know that yet. X is the number of times we're going to shape at the lower rate. We don't know that. And y is the number of times to shape at the higher rate. Again, we don't know that yet. Okay, so let's work it out step by step. And all we're going to do now is plug what we do know into our formulas in order to figure out what we need to know. So the first step, step one, is to figure out our lower rate and our higher rate. Step one, find lower and higher rate. Our formula for that is T divided by S divided by U, our base rate. Okay, so let's fill that in. It's going to be 56.5 divided by 15 divided by 2. So let's figure this out. 56.5 divided by 15 divided by 2 is 7.5, so 7.5 equals 7.5. That's kind of weird, but that's what it is. So we're still going to do the same thing. We're going to pick the next two closest even numbers to 7.5. So the lower rate, next even number is going to be 6, and the higher rate, next even number is going to be 8. So we'll fill those out. L is 6 and H is 8. So now we're ready to calculate for X and Y. Step 2. Step 2, insert our numbers into the formula. Our formula. Okay. To find X and Y. All right, so our first formula to find Y equals T minus L times S divided by U, all that divided by H minus L. And to find X equals S divided by U minus Y. Okay, so let's find Y first. We're just going to fill in our numbers. Y equals T is 56.5 minus L is 6 times S is 15 divided by U, which is 2, over H was 8 minus L, which is 6. So now we'll work the math. Y equals 56.5 minus 6 times 15 divided by 2 is 7.5, and 8 minus 6 is going to be 8 minus 6 is 2. And we'll go further. Y equals 56.5. Well, let's do multiplication first. So minus 6 times 7.5 is 45 divided by 2. Take it further. Y equals 56.5 minus 45 is 11.5 divided by 2. Y equals 5.75. And again, at the end, we're going to round that. So let's figure out X. X equals 15S divided by U2 minus y, which we just figured out, which is 5.75. And we're just going to work through everything in parentheses first. X equals 7.5 minus 5.75. X equals 1.75. 7.5 minus 5.75 is 1.75. Now we'll round these two numbers to the next whole number. So X equals 2 and Y equals 6. And we're going to write everything down just as we did before, except this time we're increasing. So it's going to be increase U stitches every L rows X times, and then increase U stitches every H rows Y times. So let's plug our numbers in. Our knitting directions are going to be increase 2 stitches every 6 rows 2 times. Okay, X is 2. Then we're going to increase 2 stitches every H. H is 8 rows Y times 6 times. All right, let's check our math. So let's see if we're right on our rows. So we're going to do 6 rows twice, that's 12. And then we're going to do 8 rows 6 times, so that's 48 rows. 12 plus 48 is 60 rows. Let's keep that in mind for 1 second. Now let's check our stitches. 2 stitches twice, that's 4 stitches. And 2 stitches 6 times, that's 12. 16. So what happened here? We wanted to get rid of, or we wanted to add 15 stitches, but we ended up with 16. And we said to ourselves that we had a total of 56.5 rows to work over, but we ended up working over 60 rows. Now, this you need to consider because why? That you have an extra 3.5 rows that you're going to be working. So that's going to be approximately a half inch difference in length. So if you can think to yourself, is a half an inch going to be a big, humongous deal in the fit of the camisole? Probably not. For myself, I'm not going to worry about it at all, actually. I'm just going to go, I don't care. And I'm going to accept that extra half inch of fabric that I'm going to work. What about our 16 stitches over here when we wanted to add 15, not 16? Well, clearly we can't add 15. Why? Because we've got 2 sides we're working with, and 15 cannot be divided evenly by 2. So our formula here added for us the extra stitch we need. So we're actually increasing 8 stitches on either side. We will increase 8 stitches here and 8 stitches here, not 7 and 6 or some uneven number. We like to be even. And so now in our schematic, we need to come back and say, hey, you know what? We went from 80 stitches, not to 85, but to 86. So when we get into this section, we need to take that 86 stitches. We need to take into consideration that 1 stitch is what I'm trying to spit out, and it won't come out. So we've, okay, so we're good for now. That was our waist to bust increases. So let's look at our schematic and see what's next. So we've done our shaping for the hips, hip to waist and waist to bust. Now we're going to knit from this point. Now remember, I said we're going to go an extra ½ inch, right, in rows. So here I had said to myself, well, I'm going to knit approximately an inch, 7 rows, even before I get on to my next part of what I'm doing here. So now I can decide, since this is going to go an extra ½ inch longer than I initially anticipated, instead of knitting a full inch, I can just knit ½ an inch, and I'm still going to have my total 9½ inch from waist to bind off area. So this would be the place where you would say to yourself, this is going to be actually 9 inches total. So you'd cross that off, put 9, and cross this off and put ½ So now half, 6.65 divided by 2 is 3.5 roughly, or 3 rows, because we're going to round you. So you're going to knit 3 or 4 rows even before you get to your bind off. And now the other thing that we discovered was that we went from 95 stitches and or we had 95 stitches here, and to decrease down, I'm sorry, we're here, I'm in the wrong area. So we went from 80 stitches and we increased to not 95 but actually 96, because why? We added that 1 stitch. So we're going to go now, we're going to take from 96 stitches, so this is where we would make that change and call this 96 stitches. So these are the little adjustments you'll make on your schematic as you're working out the math. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. Let's see, what did we just do? We did waist bust, yeah. Okay, so now the next section is this, the high bust to the cross back, or the underarm to the cross back measurement. So we're going to follow the same procedure. Get a new piece of paper. And in this case, we are decreasing. So we're going to do the same thing. Let's identify what this worksheet's going to be. This is going to be our high bust to cross back. Oops. Cross back. Decreases. Okay, so let's go to our schematic here. We said that we ended up with 96 stitches across here. And we're going to take away 5 stitches here and 5 stitches here. So we're binding off 1 inch at the underarm here. So that's 96 minus 10. It's going to bring us down to 86 stitches here. So we need to go from 86 stitches to 70 stitches. And that's a total of 16. Okay, so let's fill in our numbers again. So we've got T equals total number of rows for our decreases From our schematic, we can see that we're decreasing over an inch. That's going to be 6.65. And remember, when we do our initial calculations, we're not rounding. We round at the very end when we're finished with everything. S equals total number of stitches to decrease. And that equals 16. U equals the total of stitches to decrease per row. All right, so what are we doing? We are decreasing here and here, 2. So we're going to decrease 2 stitches each time we decrease. So equals 2. L, we don't know yet. H, we also don't know yet. L is our lower rate. We'll decrease. And H is our higher rate. We don't know those numbers yet. Then we have X, number of times decrease at our lower rate, and Y equals number of times to decrease at the higher rate. Those we don't know yet either. So it seems like it's a lot of writing and a lot of calculating and a lot of work to go step by step. And yes, when you're doing it the first few times, it's best to write everything down so it cements in your mind, and you know exactly what you're aiming for. But eventually, after you do enough of these calculations, you're going to know, you can hold the numbers in your head and just write down the formulas, and nobody but you will know what you're doing. For people who don't knit, they often are baffled by all of this, but knitting math is super easy for knitters, not so much for other people. Okay, so let's continue. Step 1, we're going to find our lower and higher rate. Step 1, find lower and higher rate. So our formula for that, T divided by S divided by U equals our base rate. So let's work through that. 6.65 divided by 16 divided by 2, base rate. 6.65 divided by 16 divided by 2 is 8, equals 0.83. So look at this. We have a fraction of a number. What do? Earlier I had said that we want to go for the next even lower number and the next higher even lower number. So in this case we have a fraction of a number. So what I like to do is I just like to get to the next whole number for the lower one, for my lower rate, which is going to be L equals 1. And then for my higher rate, it's going to be the next whole even number. In this case, is going to be 2. So why did this happen? This happened because we have such a small number of rows available for us to do our shaping in, less than 7. But have no fear, it'll work out. Trust me. Okay, so L is 1 and H is 2. So let's continue and solve for X and Y. We'll do step 2. Insert our numbers into the formula. Numbers into formulas to find X and Y. All right, So let's write our formulas down. The first formula is y equals t minus L times S divided by U over H minus L. And for x, we have x equals S divided by U minus Y. So let's find Y first. Now we're just going to plug in our numbers. Y equals 6.65 minus 1 times 16 divided by 2 over H minus L, 2 minus 1. And let's work that down further. 6.65 minus 1 times 8 over 1. Down further, y equals 6.65 minus 8 over 1. Now here's something interesting, and I'm going to make commentary about this in just a second. Y equals negative 1.35 over 1. Well, we don't work with negative numbers, do we? This is going to equal negative minus 1.35. So what do? Well, we're going to work with even numbers. So we're just going to pick the next positive even number for y. Y equals 2. So again, when I end up with a negative number here, I'm just going to go over to the next whole positive number. So conceivably, if you ever end up with a negative number here, y is always going to be 2. I haven't done enough of these to say that that might be the case, but that might be the case. I'll have to do a few more just to prove my theory to myself. In any case, let's go over and solve for y, and then we'll check our math to see if this is going to work out. So the math check is always really what tells you whether or not you were on the right track. So let's go over here and solve for x. X equals 16 divided by 2 minus y. We said y is 2. X equals 8 minus 2, which equals 6. X equals 6. All right, so we're decreasing, so let's just write our knit speak for this. So it's going to be decrease U stitches every L row X times, then decrease U stitches every H row Y times. Okay, let's plug in our numbers. Decrease 2 stitches every L row, every row, every row 6 times, then decrease 2 stitches every 2 rows, y equals 2, our higher rate 2 rows 2 times. Okay, let's do our math check. So we've got, let's check our rows first. So we've got 1 row 6 times, so that's 6 rows there. And 2 rows 2 times, so that's 4 rows there. 10 rows. And let's check our stitches. 2 stitches 6 times, that's 12 stitches. And 2 stitches 2 times, that's 4 stitches. which does indeed equal our 16 stitches that we want to get rid of. So we're okay there. But let's talk about the rows, because initially we said we were going to work over 6.65 or roughly 7 rows. But we've got 10 rows here, which means we've gone roughly 3 rows, actually 3.35 rows of difference here. So what does that tell me? That tells me that a squinchy little inch is not going to be enough to get rid of 16 stitches. I'm going to need to work this over 1.5 inches instead of a single inch, which I'm okay with that. That's okay. That's not a big deal. What is important is that I get rid of the right number of stitches. Now the other thing is we're going to decrease every row 6 times at the beginning, and then every second row. So we're going to end up in this scenario decreasing on wrong side rows in order to get 16 stitches out of there in just 1.5 inches. If I wanted to make sure that this was going to only be shaping on even side rows, then I would, based on the math is telling me that I would have to have a greater distance, maybe 2 inches or something. I'd have to work the math out for that to see what it would take to get these 16 stitches out of here only on even numbered rows. But if I want to force it to work into my design idea, then the limit that I have is 10 rows to do this shaping over 10 rows, which is going to be roughly 1.5 inches, and I can, in that scenario, get rid of the 16 stitches I need to get rid of to get to the cross back depth or cross back measurement. Okay, let's talk about our final measurement, or our final calculation, which is the neck shaping. That is here. So in every instance, we have been doing 2 decreases each time. Well, in this case, we're not, because you can work, when you get to this point, you would work across these stitches, bind off or put on a holder your center neck stitches, and then join a second ball to work the other neck, the other shoulder rather. So you're actually doing the shaping just once per side, because technically you could work this one and then come back and do that one, or you can work them both at the same time to make sure you have the same exact gauge. But if you know your gauge doesn't shift that much and it's just a little teeny bit of knitting, you could do this shoulder first and then that shoulder. Knitter's choice, I guess. So let's work over the formula for this scenario. So let's get our piece of paper. So this is going to be our worksheet for the neck shaping. And we're decreasing. And I'm going to make a little note for myself. Repeat for each neck edge. You'll see why in a second. Okay, so let's do what we did before and write down what we know so that we can find what we don't know. So firstly, we have T. T is what? Total number of rows available for our shaping. I'm just going to put decreasing for now. Okay, so according to my schematic, I gave myself a generous 1 inch, so 6.65. And again, have no fear, because the math will tell you whether you can get away with that or not, as it did in the last example. S equals total number of stitches to decrease. So coming back to here, after we had figured this out, we said to ourselves we have 70 stitches here, and we're taking 20 stitches for the center neck. That's going to leave us 50, so we're going to have 25 stitches here and 25 stitches here. So my number that I need to decrease from is going to be 25 stitches, from 25 stitches here to 20 stitches there. So total stitches to decrease, 25 minus 20 equals 5. And number of stitches to decrease equals 5. And then U, how many stitches we're going to get rid of each row. So total number of stitches to decrease per row. So we're doing each side separately, each side with its own ball of yarn, or at the same time, or first shoulder, second shoulder. So we're only doing one decrease each time for this calculation. So U is going to be 1. Okay, so then we have L, our lower rate of decreasing, H, our higher rate, those are our unknowns at this point, X, number of times to decrease at our lower rate, and Y, number of times to decrease at our higher rate. All right, so we've got what we know and what we need to find out. So step 1, find our lower and higher rate. And here's our formula for that. T divided by S divided by U, and that's our base rate. So we have, let's fill in our numbers, 6.65 divided by 5 divided by U, which is 1. So that's going to be 6.65 divided by 5 equals 1.33. So our lower rate's going to be 1, and our higher rate's going to be 2. And again, because we're not going to go into the next negative even number, so we're just going to round to our next lower number. It's going to be 1. And then our higher rate will be our next even number, which is 2. All right, step 2. We're going to insert our numbers into our formulas to find X and Y. All right, so let's write our formulas down. First Y. Y equals T minus L times S divided by U over H minus L. And for X, it's going to be X equals S divided by U minus Y. So let's fill in our numbers. Y equals T. T is 6.65 minus L, which is our lower rate is 1, times 5 divided by 1 over 2 minus 1. And Y equals 6.65 minus 1 times 5 over 1 y equals 6.65 minus 5 over 1. Y equals 6.65. Oops, I'm writing that down twice. 1. 6.65 minus 5 is 1.65 over 1. And this equals 1.65, which we're going to round to the next even number, so y equals 2. All right, let's do the same over here. Let's figure out for x. We'll just fill in our numbers. So x equals s divided by u, which is 1, minus y. So minus y is, let's just put that in there, y is 2, minus 2. So x equals 5 divided by 1 is 5, minus 2, and x equals 5 minus 2 is 3. Okay, so now we've got x and y. Let's plug in our numbers. So let's write down our knitting directions. So it's going to be decrease U stitches every L row X times, and decrease U stitches every H row Y times. So let's put our numbers into this. Decrease 1 stitch every row, 1 row, three times. Then decrease 1 stitch every 2 rows, 2 times. Okay, let's check our math. So we have 1 row 3 times, so that's 3 rows, and 2 rows 2 times, so that's a further 4 rows. That's going to be a total of 7 rows. And now let's check our stitches. 1 stitch 3 times, so that's 3 stitches. And 1 stitch 2 times, so that's 2 more stitches. And this tells us that we're going to get rid of 5 stitches, which is exactly what we need to get rid of, 5 stitches. So it's good. And 7 rows, that's a 0.35 difference from 6.65, so if that's not even, that's just negligible. So we're okay on 7 rows. But again, we're getting rid of an odd number of stitches over an odd number of rows, and we're going to be doing some decreasing every single row, as our directions tell us to. So some of these decreases are going to be on the wrong side rows. If you don't want that to happen, then the math is telling you that your next shaping has got to be maybe over 10 rows, or another greater number than this, an even number of rows, so you can do all of your shaping on the even rows. So that's it for this example of this particular formula. This is not the only way to figure out your ratios of decreasing and increasing evenly over a specified number of rows to get, from bigger number of stitches to a smaller number of stitches, and from a smaller number of stitches back up to a bigger number of stitches, and so forth. It's just one tool to have in your toolkit, and there are other ways, and maybe as easy, maybe easier, and we'll cover those in a future class. Thanks for watching. I hope all this made sense. If you have questions, please feel free to post in the comment section or head on over to Facebook to my knitting page or to my knitting students group also on Facebook, and I'll be happy to try and answer any questions to the best of my ability. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.